Good evening, everyone. My name is Tammy Gessner, and for those who do not know me, I'm a local pastor in Central Association in the Penn Central Conference. I serve, I'm my 21st year in a rural community church at Richfield United Church of Christ. Before I continue on, I need to share with all of you that our workshop this evening is going to be recorded. And if there are things you want to go back on and look upon during our conversations, it is going to be posted to the Penn Central Conference website. So you'll be able to re-find this on our website or after this whole week is done. So I'd like to start us off this evening with a moment of prayer. Will you join me? O Holy One, known to us by many names, bestow upon us your Holy Spirit as we gather and hear your call to us to use us in creating and renewing your church, binding us together in covenant with the faithful people to be welcoming and opening to all. You brought us together this evening to support each other, to challenge us, to be part of the time because we have things we can contribute to each other in a supportive and loving way. Let our time together be a time of refreshment, renewal, and inspiring to our rural church setting communities in our association, but also in our national setting. We pray this in the name of the one who said he would never leave us alone. Amen.
Amen.
So as many of you know, that our theme for our annual conference this year is renewing the covenant that we share. And our title for our theme for our workshop this evening is Rural Churches, Blessings, Challenges, and the Covenant. Our presenters this evening are, first is Reverend Amelia Price. And Amelia serves with the good people of St. Paul's, known to us as my neighbor at Verdilla, outside Selinsgrove. She serves as a chaplain to the Central Association and the Secretary Treasurer for the Central Association. She recently began ministry with the UCC Coalition of Rural Churches and Ministry, and it was a special emphasis on internet access for underserved and unserved churches and communities. And I will say she has been a blessing to my church because we have just gone live. So thank you, Amelia, for that blessing. Our next presenter this evening, and Roberto, please, if I destroy your last name, please forgive me, but it's Reverend Roberto Ochoa. Am I close?
Ochoa.
Ochoa, okay. He is Minister of Ethics, Inclusion, and Congregational Support for Rural and Small Churches for Faith Education, Innovation, and Formation, known as Faith Info, in the national setting of the United Church of Christ. He serves congregations and provides UCC and ecumenical resources for congregational assessment, support, and advancements, especially for rural, ethnic, identified, and congregations of color. Currently, Roberto is National Staff Representative for the initiative, our UCC Rural Congregational Network and Gathering proposed for 2023. So welcome to you both. Did I leave anything else that you would like to share? If not, then I will turn our meeting over to our co-presenters.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so very much. The only thing, either Tom or Tammy or Paul, make sure we have a list of everyone who is here. I failed to do that. Greetings. Thank you so much for being here. We are all connected with rural churches in one way or another. So we're here tonight to learn from each other. And I appreciate your time, and I look forward to hearing from you. Now, I know, Julie, you have several people in your space. Work it how you need, because this is going to be interactive. If you have the bandwidth, leave it on so that everybody can communicate. I'm not a rural ministry expert. I serve a small church. I've served 4 small churches in this association. So my hope for tonight is that we all learn from each other. I'm very grateful that Roberto is with us tonight, and I'm going to turn it over for his hopes for the night.
Thank you, Pastor Amelia. Good evening. It is such a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I bring you greetings from the national setting of the United Church of Christ on behalf of Reverend Dr. John Dorher, who is, of course, our outgoing president and general minister, and Reverend Tracy Blackman, who is the associate general minister for Justice and Local Church Ministries, where Faith Info resides. You know, I've had the pleasure of working with Amelia for almost 2 years, and she knows her stuff, and rural ministries is very important to me. I also do bring greetings from my home church in Cleveland, Ohio, Mount Zion Congregation, UCC. And I'm a member of the Heartland Conference, UCC, not far from y'all in Pennsylvania. So, my hopes for today is to be present. We will talk about a little bit about the history about the UCC Coalition of Rural and Small Town Churches and Ministries, how that came about, maybe share a little bit about our first ever national gathering that we had in February virtually, which was outstanding, and continuing the conversation, because definitely it is important for you to all know that as I have a strong commitment, and I'm not alone in the national setting, and definitely not alone with conferences. Many conferences, because of our gathering, has started rural ministry networks within their conferences, so that to be able to connect and be able to share and uplift the stories, you know. And sometimes we say, what is the challenges of rural ministries? But sometimes what we forget is there is so much to learn, and the celebrations that you have to offer. Because as Amelia was saying, is over 50% of our congregations are in rural and small town settings. That's a significant number. And so we're here, I'm here, Amelia's here, the coalition's here, you know, to continue making sure that our voices are heard together. Thank you. Amelia.
First thing I want us to think about is, what is rural ministry? And I dare say that for each of us, it'll be something slightly different. But as Roberto reminded us, and every time you pick up a pamphlet, rural churches are 50% of the church. They're 50% of the churches worship less than 100 people a week. And I hear that and I laugh, because if I have 25 people, I'm doing really, really well. So the first thing that I want to say is that we matter. We matter not just to the people that we serve, but our churches matter to the church. And I really believe that that is happening. I think we have an opportunity through gatherings like this to be more vocal about what our needs are. Because frankly, the needs that we have here in central Pennsylvania, which is where most of us are different than people would have in the big island of Hawaii, or that what we have in Montana, both of which were individuals that were at our coalition gathering in February. And we heard some extraordinary stories of ministry, but there are needs that go with it. So my hope tonight is that we share, that we talk about what are the joys and the opportunities, the challenges, and that we share with each other the things that work. So Roberto, to you.
So, Amelia says, what is rural ministries? And rural ministries is really hard to peg. You know, like she said, it differs from location. Is it geographic? Is it population? Is it agriculture? Is it forestry? Is it, you know, like in Vermont, the difference between what may be happening in Vermont and Arizona? Is it a place where people come for vacations? You know, where hunting or fishing is one of the big industries. There's an array of explanations or opinions of what rural and small town ministries is. But for our situation, you know, we ask ourselves, what is our role? What is our role in the communities and serve the communities? What is our purpose? You know, and how do we navigate the changing landscape of many things that are occurring within our communities? And one of the things that we find is how do we respond to pastoral needs, needing pastoral leadership within our churches? How do we find pastors or pastoral leaders to lead us? How do we take care of our elderly, those are aging out? How do we deal with situations about access, that we have less access in a rural setting than in an urban setting, especially when it comes to education, medical, social services. You know, right now the big conversation, of course, is mental health because of the pandemic. And you know, one thing that the rural and urban setting may have in common is the mental health challenges that have hit us, but the difference is access. You know, so how can we make sure that we mobilize and get services out in the rural and small town communities, where many times the economies are also changing? You know, companies are leaving, you know, schools are closing, you know, so all of these. And so I have found that the church, in many of these seasons, we are the center of the life in many of our communities. Sometimes we take up the slack that is not needed, maybe for childcare, providing food, visiting the elderly, having visiting doctors or nurses coming to our churches to conduct clinics, all of that, which is the innovation ability of the small town churches and rural churches that we need to look at, and how conferences and national settings, how can we mobilize and offer resources to ensure that our small town rural churches are being equipped, because also the vulnerability of the changing tides of going on. Many times our United Church of Christ are churches that sometimes offer a voice for the marginalized. You know, so how do we offer the support to help navigate those and care and pastoral care and compassion? So my hope here is that we can start a dialogue. Hearing their stories was really effective. It's hearing their stories of, number one, you know, what are the strengths? I mean, looking at the strengths first, you know, because that, you know, we all have problems, but looking at our strengths and taking stock of the strengths, and then looking what problems could be solved with the strength that we have. Number two, what can we work cooperatively, you know, with relationships? Because if there's one thing small town rural settings are good at, is relationship building, whereas in an urban setting, because of shifting of populations, much more transitory. In small town rural areas, you have relationships built, and that's something for us, the wider church, to learn. You know, when we deal with the issues in urban or sometimes suburban areas. So I'm going to pass it back to Amelia to kind of lead us, because she has some questions and stuff like that. Lead us into, first of all, hearing your stories, because we really don't want to talk a lot. We want to hear what you have to say and share.
I absolutely agree with that. So the first thing that I'm going to ask, and Julie, I know this is going to be a bit harder for you. For those of you who can use the chat, and I know some of you do, I have some challenges with that. But if you can use the chat, would you put in who you are and where you're from and what you do at the church? Notice I didn't say what your role is. What do you do at the church? And for those of you who can't do chat, perhaps we'll get you to share that once everybody gets a chance to populate the chat a little bit. And the first thing that I do want us to talk about is the joys, is the strengths. What is that privilege like, serving in a small church? Anybody? Carolyn, it looks like you're talking, but you're muted.
Yes. What was the question? Because I had started typing my answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did do that to you, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
I did. Okay, do one thing at a time. Put in your chat where you are, who you are, and what you do. Try to inspire people and design worship. Also lead, yes, you do. You lead good choirs, virtual and in person. That would be Julie Holm. And George Steckert, is that correct? Gettysburg? Treasurer and an elder.
That's correct.
Welcome, George. Did I get your name right, Steckert?
That's correct. You did.
Thank you.
Oh, she can't see.
Yeah, we make that bigger.
How are we doing there? We okay?
Oh. I'm used to my phone.
Here's the litany for the night. Technology is wonderful when it works. Yes.
Just a BBFOF. I think they'll know that you came with me.
You're good. There you go. Emily Degnan, St. Paul, Sacramento, Music Ministry, Worship Parish Life, and Prayer Chain. Very good, Emily. Thank you. Dot, not currently working in a church due to health issues, grew up small town, small community, and have preached in small churches in the past. Always appreciate the vitality and dedication of small church members. Yes, yes.
Big amen. That's a
Yes.
big amen.
I think you're getting your
I'm treasy.
all right, close enough.
We got Beth.
Um,
on. Good.
Touch that.
Treasurer. Gotcha.
That's it.
There you go. You okay?
No.
All right. There you go. It's okay. We got it.
Yeah.
You're good. You're good. You're good. You're okay.
I see Carolyn Herman is a member of Paradise UCC in rural Milton, PA. I try to keep in touch with all members and visit as warranted. I also sing in the choir. I have stepped back at church since I have become involved in the wider church.
Say ditto.
Nice job, Carolyn. I see
Very
we
good.
have a lot of music lovers.
Yes, we do.
Nothing like music to inspire us, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, please refresh my memory. Julie, you lead the virtual choir for Penn Central? Oh my God, Julie.
Yes, I do. I do.
Oh my
And in
God. Oh my
fact,
God.
we have an anthem coming out on Saturday right after the meeting. It's going to be used in the opening worship. Actually, I should make it come out on Friday. But anyway, there's a really wonderful bilingual anthem coming out.
Very
All
good.
right. And Julie, that choir, I mean, we got more remarks about the virtual choir view, you know, for our worship services to the virtual gatherings. It was a true blessing for all of us.
And that's the first question. What is the joy? What are the things that bring us life in this opportunity of small church ministry? Anybody,
And feel free to unmute yourself and share.
please.
It's a sense of family. I've been to big churches. My daughter was in North Carolina and even here in Pennsylvania, and there's just not that sense of family. People just come and go, come and go.
Yes, there's a closeness in the small churches with the other members of the congregation.
Others?
Yeah, it's nice to know that you can be in church and know basically everybody who's in your church.
True, true. And you see that when you have a situation like we had here on Sunday, where people woke up, even Saturday night, they knew that there was damage to their house. I know the neighbors have already been around. They've already been to people's houses. What do you need? What can we do? And this is where they struggle, because right now there's nothing to do but wait. Susan, Rudy, I see that. Thank you very much. We're going to be with Roberto at General Synod. Be sure you say hi to him.
Okay.
Others, other joys, other opportunities.
Small churches tend to really reach out to people that are struggling or have health issues. I know myself, I had a health issue several months ago, and the church was very supportive and understanding with my mom and my sister, because I'm the only driver, and I spent a month in the hospital.
Oh, boy. Okay. I'm glad to hear they stepped up.
How were you feeling?
Much better. I developed a bone infection in my leg and had to have my foot and my ankle amputated back in January.
Oh, Emily,
Yes.
are you still able to drive?
Yes, I have spina bifida, so I use hand controls to drive to begin with. So
Okay.
driving wasn't affected in that way.
Okay. Prayers go with you.
We'll definitely
so.
continue prayers for you, Emily.
Yes. For myself, I grew up in a rural church. And when I answered the call, I felt the call to serve in rural churches, because it felt like home.
Thank you, Tammy. I didn't grow up in small areas. When I married my husband almost 9 years ago, I moved to rural Snyder County. I've never lived in an agricultural community in my entire life. Even though I served 3 other churches in small communities, they were no longer based on agriculture.
Maintenance around the church sings in the choir. Note from Julie keeps the pastor happy.
What's this?
Sorry, I was just telling him what I wrote.
Ah,
One thing that's a plus of rural churches, in my opinion, is that we can really accomplish things, and you have a feeling of accomplishment when a small group of people comes through and actually is able to get something done. It really feels, whether it's we participate in a coat drive every fall. We do a Christmas project with the Danville State Hospital. We have a number of other things that we do throughout the year. We do cheer baskets when a tiny little church can do 60 to 80 cheer baskets for shut-ins at Christmas. That really feels like an accomplishment. It really feels like you have a role. That I sometimes think when you're a big church is more taken for granted.
And what Julie said, I'd like to expand the question, is that sometimes when we look at small churches, or small membership churches rather, because there's no such thing as a small church, the question is, what impact does your church have on your community? Is that as beyond your own internal memberships? And Julie touched on some stuff. Julie says, like, providing baskets for the community, providing services to the community. So what type of services do your churches provide for the community?
Go ahead, Linda.
I'm Linda Williams, and I go to St. John's UCC in Lewisburg. Been there all my life, born and raised. The family is really important. And right now, my husband has some health issues and I have some. And so we've been doing Zoom for our Sundays. Not quite the same, but it's fun to see some of the people and watch, the videos from church. But I think it's the joy of St. John's, I think, is that I do is getting in my position. We've really made an attempt to provide missions throughout our community. We right now, at this point, are growing like small garden of our own. We plant things, and as they harvest, they're taken over to the Miller Center for their food bank that be given out for the fresh produce. And I think that's just a joy to share. And we do a lot of sharing with children and youth at Christmas and Easter. So we look for opportunities that we can share, not just the money, but of ourselves. And that's really one of the blessings of the smaller church.
Other impacts.
Linda, I did it again.
You want me to mute you, Linda? There you go.
And I love what Linda, can you imagine the impact in the community of feeding folks that may not even know the church, but the power of that effort of providing food to those that may need it, and providing services for children, that's something we have to look at, is that the church is not necessarily the membership side, but again, the impact in serving the community, which we are called by Jesus Christ to do.
Yeah, the numbers are not the important thing. That's why I'm grateful that Roberto raised the issue of impact. One of the things that's popular in my church is the children and youth backpacks. We do school supplies in the fall, and we do weekend food throughout the school year. If it has to do with children, it's a, what do you want? What do you need? When can we get it? There's no question at all when it involves children. Others, impacts or joys.
I know.
Go ahead, Emily.
Okay, I know our church in Sacramento, Pennsylvania, just right on the edge of Schuylkill County. We donate to one of the church's food closets, and we're a small church and have a small membership, but we have a lot of talented musicians, and we have a handbell choir that reaches out to the community and the different churches and performs on a regular basis. And we just had our church performed a celebration of Christian gifts a few weeks ago, where we had people singing, our handbell choir performed, we had poems, we had a lot of just gifts to share with the community.
That's fantastic. Because one of the things you read is that music is hard in the smaller churches. That doesn't exactly apply on this screen, does it? That's fantastic. Well, we have to be honest, okay? Because except for Carolyn, we don't live in paradise. There are. Roberto, remind me to tell you how Carolyn needs to tell you how they end their service before we're done here today. But what are some of the challenges that we have? Not challenges that are, oh, it's me. Challenges are opportunities to grow. So what are some of the grit in the road that gives us traction to go to the next thing?
I know at our church, a lot of the same people do everything.
Yeah. Yep, that's a common one. And let's be honest, the age of some of the members in our church.
Mm-hmm.
We except for you, Emily, there's not a whole lot of young faces on this screen.
And,
But
and
we're mighty.
Emily, that's one of the reasons I was almost embarrassed to write that, but that's one of the reasons that I have pulled back, hoping that there would be others who would step up. And unfortunately, that just doesn't seem to be happening, but I saw a need in the wider church, and so I have made the decision that I'm not quite as involved in the everyday life of my church. I'm still there and I still show up. And if I'm asked to do anything, I will certainly do that. But because if our churches are going to survive, it can't just be one or two people. And that's hard. I'm sure everybody on the screen kind of can relate to that in their church.
It's kind of a
And
double-edged.
Carolyn, what you said is so right, spot on. That's why especially many conferences have lay training or lay theological forums or opportunities. And one of the things is, how do we find strategies to mentor and groom people to go beyond what we do? How do we empower folks? How do we just encourage them to do that? Because you're right. Burnout is big. Burnout is really big. And also, another strategy about that too is, looking for pastors. And sometimes, in a period of time where many of our churches can only sometimes afford a part-time pastor, how can we develop and encourage, especially the laity, to be able to take roles that many times it was viewed as the privy of the pastor. So, here's an opportunity, like Amelia said, is that by developing networks and how to encourage one another, because Carolyn, we need you in the wider church. We need that experience. Because that's why I'm here, is that we need the experience and the wisdom of the room. And so, and God is calling you to go beyond the church, and that's spending time what it is. God calls us beyond the walls of our local churches.
Well, and that's the double-edged sword sometimes, because as we have a feeling of family, as we have, lifetime commitments in some cases, it can feel to those of us who come in later that there's not a place. So one of the challenges is encouraging and drawing and training, grooming those that'll take our place. And one of the challenges is sometimes people are not ready to give it up when they should. Let's just be honest. Sometimes that does happen.
And I didn't want to be one of those people.
Absolutely, right. I will share, since she apparently will not, that Carolyn is the associate moderator of Penn Central Conference at this point. The vice moderator.
The vice moderator.
Vice moderator.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
I also have sucker written across my forehead.
No. Okay, moving right along.
No, Carolyn, it's talk to me.
Uh-huh.
Oh, is that it?
Talk to me.
Okay.
Others, challenges, opportunities.
I think the challenge that I've had over the course of my 20 years at Richfield, being at the same church as their pastor, is they're still waiting for that yellow bus of evangelical children to be pulled up and to welcome them in the doors. It should be their parents that are bringing them to church, not us going out beyond our doors. And then I also have the folks that won't let their roles go. And unfortunately, I have a member of my congregation that's very supportive to me, and who also serves the wider church in Central Association. And he and I have had several conversations, and unfortunately, we felt until the major of those people pass, change will not occur within our congregation, no matter how much we try to move them beyond. But he and I have jumped beyond the doors and went to our Lutheran brothers and sisters and said, let us come together and worship together during a Sunday school hour before each of our worship services. And we've now grown to 30 people in that Sunday school, both Lutheran and United Church of Christ. And it's showing them that, well, maybe it is okay to go beyond the doors. So trying to make that safe environment where they feel safe, but where they're also grieving the loss of family.
Yeah. Others, Dot or Bray or Julie, any of your cohort? Or Linda?
I'll say and I know we've talked about this a lot in-house here, that infrastructure resources are our biggest issues right now. And we have not enough and too much. We are a blended congregation. We are in the process of adopting new bylaws so that we will be a single congregation instead of 2 UCC and 1 ELCA congregations.
I see. Okay.
Means right now, we have 3 churches, all of which we don't even use the first half of, because no church buildings, yes, 1 church, 3 buildings. We don't use the first half of the pews ever, except for the choir. The choir sits there. Thank you, choir. And even one of them is too big, and we have 3. And at the same time, we don't have the personal resources, we don't have the maintenance resources and things like that. Now, we are trying to sell 2 of them, and we haven't determined which 2. We're going to let God do that. We put all 3 of them on the market. We'll see which ones sell. But even then, we will have challenges because only one of those 3 is truly accessible right now. So we have to fix the accessibility issue. And you know, the church can only afford a part-time pastor, as we know. That can be a challenge. So lots of infrastructure and resources issues in our little churches.
You're muted, Roberto.
Julie,
That's
before you leave, I have a question. Is that, okay, so we're talking about 3 communities. We're talking about Brush Valley, Rose,
Brush Valley Fusion of
Ravensburg,
Faith.
and Madison.
No. We're talking about St. Peter's Lutheran, Rebersburg, St. Peter's UCC, Rebersburg, and Christ UCC, Madisonburg. I pastor all 3 of them. We have, for the last 7 years, worshiped together. We've been all together for 10. For the first 3, we had separate services, but now we have 1 service. We rotate from church to church. And we are in reality a single community. We've really integrated. All our mission is together, all our education is together, our choir is from all 3 congregations, all that. So we are really one congregation, but now we have all these churches, and you know, everyone loves their own church. It's a very, very challenging time in our history.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I wasn't sure if you rotated. So do you rotate every week or monthly? Do you just, you know, how's it?
Right now we're
decided?
doing monthly. Yeah.
And are you receiving, I'm sorry for being so nosy, Julie. I'm just curious. What type of resources are you using to evaluate and to assess and discern this process?
Well, we have support and advice from both the Penn Central Conference and the Allegheny Synod of the ELCA, which we're associated with, and both Nora Faust and Kevin Schock, who is the assistant to the bishop there, have been very involved with us. We had last September a full church retreat where we sat through and looked at our history and thought of our issues. We voted in January to put the churches on the market, and we are in the process of we are actually in the process of adopting bylaws. Our first vote will be in early July to adopt. We're going to replace the current constitutions and bylaws with a single constitution and bylaws. And again, the conference and the Allegheny Synod have assisted us with that. Also, you guys have a resource for churches in transition that you can get through Pilgrim Press that we used for our to structure our retreat, and which we are using in some of our worship as we go through different transition points.
Julie, do you
Thank
recall the title of that resource?
Not off the top of my head, but I can tell you later on. I just have to look it up on my phone.
If you don't mind, if you could dump that in the chat or just.
I
just
will, I will.
Shout it out when you get it.
Sure.
Thank you. Others? Challenges and opportunities, Linda or Dot or Ray? Don't want to put anybody on the spot here.
Hi, this is George from Gettysburg.
Thank you, George.
One of the things we have the same problem with people being on or doing, few people doing all the work, I would say, but we decided we had too many committees. And we actually merged 3 of them. I know, don't ask me what their outreach, I forget what the 3 were, but into one missions and ministry committee.
Okay.
Or ministry and mission, I forget which. But either way, trying to reduce the responsibilities of people who are on committees. And pardon me, my dog's probably going to bark.
Okay.
And then delegate different projects to people who are interested in working on them. So for instance, this coming weekend, while I and our pastor are at the conference meeting, other members of our church will be at the library's Fun Fest, which is out in the rec park. But it's not generally just one committee doing all that. It's a project that people have signed up for because they like doing that sort of thing. And they don't have to attend a monthly meeting every month. They just participate in what they want. So that's been, I think, successful. It's met with some reservation by some people who are like, well, I don't know what's going on anymore. But it isn't going too badly, I don't think. Now we're trying to merge our finance committee with our the committee that seeks for donations, and I can't think of their name now. Stewardship, yes, to try to pull that together. And that's been a little bit tricky because some of the finance committee things of how to make the budget and how to pay, where things fall in the line items are a little bit different than trying to drum up money. But that's working out too. And I guess from another standpoint is that we've been kind of lucky since COVID, and we've gone from all online services to now in-person services again, although we still stream our services on Facebook. We've actually had I'm going to call it an influx of new members, even though it's only been 2 here, 3 there, 4, it's kind of amazing. We, since COVID, we have a family of 4 join us with 2 children, and I'm going to say still elementary school, and as well as a couple older people. One gentleman stopped into our church thinking it was a different church, and the church he wanted and the event he wanted to go to turned out it was a different Sunday. So he stayed in our adult Sunday school class, found that he enjoyed it and enjoyed the discussion, and has since become a member of our church.
Very
which,
good.
like out of the blue. So I mean, it's been luck, I think. I don't know that there's any specific thing out there that says, here, come see us. But we've had the good fortune. From a standpoint, and I don't want to tell me to shut up when it's time. But earlier question was, what are some of the missions that we do? We, about 5 or 6 years ago, started collecting diapers, and we give them to an organization here in town that distributes them amongst new families and new parents. And that, in fact, when we first announced that we were going to do this, one of our members said, "Oh, thank God, something I don't have to write another check for." But that then morphed, and now we also collect adult, I'm going to call them diapers, but adult incontinence supplies, because the local office of the aging said that's something they need. They get requests for that all the time. So our members, just when you're out grocery shopping, just pick up things, and you dump the diapers in a crib that we have in church, and then we have a big box for the incontinence supplies. But that's been pretty helpful. So it's for us, that was going outside the usual, bring canned goods in for the food pantry and things like that. So it was just something different.
Amelia, this is
Sure.
Paul. I'm a tech person this evening, but I'd like to put out a
Please.
couple thoughts if that's in
Please,
order.
absolutely, please.
A couple years ago, I forget who it was, but it was somebody talking about modern ministry and person, and I can't remember who it was, and it's not really the point. But now ministers have to be social workers, public school teachers. They, that it's not just, as I tell my as I joke with my dad, one day a week job anymore. It's really it's anyway. But that's how. But if you listen to this conversation, that's what you're kind of talking about. The church is just more than Sundays. I know that's, yeah, but in rural communities, it's. I mean, you're talking about, like, we're talking about severe weather over the weekend. Like, I mean, you're. I mean, depending on what circumstances is, you can be a shelter for your community, or a place your community can go, for disaster response or whatever. That's what happened when the Campbelltown tornado came through.
Yeah.
25 years ago, but it's 20 years ago. It was Salem that kind of was the epicenter for the disaster response.
How many of our churches used to be air raid shelters or nuclear shelters? Some of them still have the little triangles on the building. So yeah, we're the center of the community. Thank you, Julie. The thing
And-
that I heard, go ahead, whoever it
Well,
was.
that's what I did on Saturday after they called and said that they had damage. I went up to the church and I parked and I walked the neighborhood. And I left our consistory members deal with what was happening there at the church to go out into the community to check to see how folks were. And then we talked and did our debriefing in church together as a community. So.
And that's the important thing. That's when you're the heart of the community.
That was the first time I ever seen a snow plow come through the community, pushing hail, balls of hail and tree limbs and leaves.
My member who has to replace everything on their house was telling me about that.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've heard just about everybody say is the generosity, but the fatigue. There's nobody to follow me, but the generosity is keeping people going. How do we live that generosity? How do we encourage those? I don't want to say behind us, because I'd sooner think of us, together. How do we encourage that generosity and share that sense of community with those who may be hanging back a little bit? In an ideal world, there's no wrong answer short of whips and chains. Go ahead, Linda. I'll unmute you just a second. Go for it. Nope, you got to hit the button. Linda, you got to hit the button.
Gotcha.
There you go.
I think one of the realizations, especially even since the pandemic, but maybe before, but it makes us more aware of now, we need to know where our churches are at this time. Our church has become more for the building across our street that has a lot of senior citizens, the independent living. A lot have come from that, and more the elderly, because that's where our church is. And then I think one of the things that's helping us, we have a mission every month for an offering. And we really started emphasizing what the month is for, what our mission is. And they're even doing mission moments in our church service about that. And the first couple of months, we've had more than what we budgeted for every one of those missions. So it's an awareness. You got to let them know, what's really happening, how important, what's this for? We have one great hour sharing. Well, what is that type thing? And those and that seems to really help with the missions that we always had. And it's communication, it's the awareness. And then the other thing I think we need to do as any church is offered different opportunities. My church has several things that they did all their life, but it's not going to work now. We don't have the people, we don't have the number to do some of it. Think of other things. What works for us best is what we can do as a whole church. Like a program, or like he said about collecting diapers or collecting incontinence. Those are excellent. They're excellent. They're very expensive items. And
But
that's
very
really
needed, yeah.
absolutely very needed. So just finding an issue that speaks to maybe the ones that aren't stepping up on committees, but would certainly support a special mission.
And that goes back to what George was saying. I'm pointing because George is on the bottom right of my screen.
Right.
Find what works now.
Mhm.
What worked
Yeah.
before was for that time. And what inflames people now, how to do things now, may be a little bit different. Who would have thought 5 years ago that we would do a workshop on rural ministry, which is by definition an underserved area for internet access, but we would be able to pull off 3, 6, 9, 12 people to come together on a Monday night in June to talk about the heartbeat of our communities and the heartbeat of this UCC. And I'm a bit of a zealot. I didn't come up as a UCC person. I chose this utterly confused bunch of people. So, you know, this was a conscious choice for me. And I'm tempted to say, you know, come on, this is a good group of people over here. Come see what we've got to offer.
So,
Others,
Amelia,
go ahead, Roberto.
so Amelia, so what, what Linda was talking about, for instance, offering of the wider church ministers, what is that about? And when we talk about relationships, especially within our local churches and communities, relationships is a form of covenancy, that we have together. We're all members of an association, we're all members of a conference, we're all members of what we call the United Church of Christ. And we covenant to be with each other, to be in relationship with one another. So we talked about your local church and we talked about the community. What does the relationship look like with your association, conference, and national? What do you see? What's there? And indeed, what could be improved, especially as we navigate to do strategies in helping and supporting our rural and small town church?
I will speak from the position of Secretary Treasurer in Central Association. There is a sense of disconnect. And I don't know where it's coming from. I'm not saying that National's doing it. I'm not saying we're doing it. I'm not saying the conference is doing it. There's just a sense in which there's a disconnect. And one of the things that we've been working on in Central is how to bridge that. How do we make the connections? That's why I'm so grateful, Roberto, for you being with us tonight. So that, we can, let's just name the elephant in the room. I saw heads going when I used the word disconnect. And we're not going to solve it, but what do we as individuals need to address that? What can we say about it in our own settings? That is a question. So if you have anything, now's the time.
It's hard to get that kind of motion going when everybody is struggling. It's not like we're out pounding the streets to take members from this, but it's almost like it sort of is, and that's too bad that we can't work together. Kind of like the communities of ministry. As I'm getting to learn about them. I mean, there's an interest for this community of ministry and there's an interest in that community of ministry. It's like, let's foster the interest in that church, in our churches, almost like we need to well, like Julie is music. And Tammy is a relationship, you know, how many pastors go out and walk the streets after a disaster? Hats off to you, Tammy. I mean, that was wonderful. And so her church is going to be known for that, you know. So it's almost like each church needs to develop an identity and then grow from that. I know that sounds really simple and easier said than done, but I think each church needs to have their own identity and really foster that, grow with it. That's kind of
Julie,
my
I saw
thought.
you. Yep, Julie, I saw you got up. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, some specific resources that I think would be helpful for the small church from my point of view. Music, of course, is a big thing for me. Small churches have choirs with 3, 4 people. We have UCC composers. If they could occasionally do stuff and market it for tiny choirs, that would be wonderful. It is so hard to find resources, and most of them, frankly, I end up finding in the Catholic Church. GIA is the one that is a go-to for that. It would be lovely if I had a Richard Brooksford Colligan thing that wasn't SATB, but maybe 2-part mixed, you know. Another thing is Christian education when your Bible study is 2 people or 3 people. Ideas for that. We have a Bible study and a book group, and that is our whole Christian education, you know, with 15 people in worship. That's about as far as it can go. And frankly, it's all I can manage. It's wonderful, but it would be really lovely to have some resources for those. The Bible studies that we have really kind of, they require a level of discussion that you don't get with 3 people. They need to be a little bit more of thought about that. That kind of thing is something that if we could be seeing more of that from the national office. Also, wouldn't it be nice to have a repository? You know, Penn Central Conference has a YouTube channel where our virtual choir anthems are. We're not the only one out there. We're not even the only one in the UCC. Wouldn't it be lovely if there was a place where small churches, because some of them don't have choirs, because they don't have any musicians left, or they don't have enough musicians, or the musicians are so old their voices are going. Wouldn't it be lovely if there was, along with worship ways, here is a anthem, a virtual choir anthem you can use from the Penn Central Conference. We have almost 30 of them out there now, so.
Wow.
Julie, Julie, I love what you're saying. It's so true. I mean, nothing more heartbreaking than I tune in and live stream a worship service, you know, either through Facebook or through Zoom, and they have to block the music because they don't have the rights and the licensing. So the online virtual audience loses, you know, that ability to that musical spiritual side. So Julie, you're right on. I mean, and that's good ideas that I will be bringing up to Reverend Dr. Cheryl Lindsay about a depository, because they're out there. I mean, individual churches have these, and they say, you know, feel free to use it for worship services and broadcast live streaming. So yes, that's something that we could definitely look into.
Yeah, in our case, if we have it out there, the Penn Central Conference has paid for the license already. And we do tell you, if you have like a 1 license subscription, please report it, but you can still use it, even if you don't.
Others.
other ideas or other concerns of how can we nurture this connection, because we're a connective church. How do we nurture these connectivity relationships?
Well, it has to start at the national level. If the statistics are showing that the greater majority of our churches are smaller churches, then they need to recognize that. Are they? I'm not asking, I'm not putting you on the spot, Roberto, at all. I'm a lay person, and I probably don't use the resources like those of you who are pastors, but I don't know that what they're doing is reaching the small church. Julie brought so many good ideas. I know I generally read the weekly seeds, but even that is written at a level that those sitting in the pew, or for me as a lay person who might want to have a Bible study, I need a little bit more than that. So
You're echoing what we heard at the Rural Coalition gathering in February. We heard very clearly from churches across the country that a lot of the resources, sorry, Roberto, but a lot of the resources that come down from national are geared to a different setting. Worship ways, even seeds sometimes are geared to a different type of community than where we come from.
mhm.
And Roberto, I heard that was going to go back to the writers group. Am I correct?
Yes, I mean, it's just like, and it's going to be ongoing. I mean, that's why the coalition was developed, because Carolyn, you're right. National finally, when I wrote the report back in 2021 and my discovery about when I did a survey about who our churches or where our churches were, I was taken aback myself. I was born and raised in urban. I'm an urban kid, East Los Angeles. But, my rural experience was when I was in the Air Force in Grand Forks, South Dakota. And when I was up there 3 years, heck, I had a big education. But that's a whole different story. But what I'm saying is that we didn't realize that our mindset was so geared to urban issues, that we pride ourselves to be the voice of the marginalized communities. We didn't realize how marginalized our rural and small town churches were feeling, and we've been, and in the past 2.5 years since the Coalition for UCC Rural Churches was started, and we meet monthly, we're doing everything to address that, and to hear and to present forums, to make sure that resources are looked, that are not, that to make sure that the rural church, because I think what's happening is that there is a realization that the backbone of the United Church of Christ lies within folks here in this room, and that's the reality. And so, and the terminology sometimes what we use at national doesn't translate well. Trust me. I mean, I work with ethnic identified congregations. We have to translate in a way that's understandable and that is really embraced. And sometimes we have to watch out with the language because that resonates different in our rural and small churches. Be more frank, be more blank. Don't, so just that and how we get those materials out, and so we're working on it. I mean, we're just starting. I mean, we're just, we're in the early stages, but the goal here is to acknowledge and recognize, where the rural and small town churches go. UCC, is in a position to either enable that or, the consequences are too severe.
Well, and that's why this kind of gathering is so important. Because what other event would draw the breadth of experience and involvement and interest and breadth of people than what we have here tonight, than talking about where we live and where we work. And one of the things, as we're thinking about covenant and what it means to be connected to the national church, I don't want that to be a negative thing. But what I want us to hear is what Roberto just said. The churches that we serve, the places that we live, they are the backbone of this church. And when you think about the impact and the effect that we can have, we made jokes on Sunday. There were so few of us because there were all kinds of things going on, and with the hail, people didn't come. But we were joking about we're the mighty few, and we are the mighty few. We're the ones that care. Talk about being frank. We're the ones that give a you-know-what, and that's why we're here. So, we've got about 20 minutes, and I want to honor time. So we've talked about joys. We've talked some about challenges. We've talked a very little bit about covenant. And we've begun to talk about connections with the national church.
Mhm.
Now, we also talked at some length about how the way we used to do things may not work anymore. That's real. It doesn't mean anything was bad. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means it's a different world. We wouldn't be in the Hollywood squares if it wasn't a different world, would we? So as we think about how to do things moving forward, George kind of primed the pump a little bit with some task-oriented groups. Roberto has talked about a difference in emphases of resources coming out. The question that I have, and sorry folks, this wasn't on my list, but I told you we were going to riff tonight. If there were no obstacles, and if we could ask for whatever we wanted within reason, what would be the one thing that we felt would give our church that gentle or not so gentle push to do what they need to do? What would that thing be? Would it be people? Would it be resources? Would it be place? Would it be music? What would it be? What's the one thing? Oh, gee, if we just had this, what would this be? Dot, you're unmuted. You got something to say?
Oh, I did a while ago, but somebody else said what I was going to say, sort of. So I left it.
Okay, all right. Go, okay, Linda. Push your button.
Sorry.
It's okay, you got it.
I attended the Central Association meeting, annual meeting, by Zoom, which was a little different than doing in person, but it was very good. And we had some really good discussions. And I'm sure we're not the only association in Penn Central Conference that's got a very wide range of area for its association.
That is true.
But Central definitely does. And I heard it's an old word. We can call it something else. I think we could bring it up current. But there's so many churches in some areas that are together very close. And they could get together. It used to be called clusters. I just think there's such strength in doing something like that. The other thing that was suggested, and I really wrote this down and thought it was sort of neat, that if the association had a challenge for all the churches in our association, like whether it's a mission project, but that they could work on together and then come together, to celebrate it when it's completed. I think that could be a very good strength. And the other thing was that if we challenged our churches Like, one time they'll get the challenge and then they'll have maybe a month to think about it, and then we get together again, sort of like this format, and talk about what their responses were to that. But that might help with some of the connectiveness and joining together and serving the purpose of getting to know each other more. And I think that's really missing in our vast geographic area. It really is. And that's why I came tonight, because I celebrate the rural churches, and I think that they do such wonderful ministry. And I think sometimes they're not known.
Thank
Like
you.
they should. Yeah. Make it.
Others.
I think our biggest issue where we are is geographically. If geographic was not even an issue, you know, a lot of the things happen, at least for us, in the Harrisburg area, and it's a barrier. Sometimes those mountains cause a barrier. You have people, you know, if an event's taking place down in Harrisburg, the churches up here don't always want to go down there, and vice versa. It's a real barrier. And I think another barrier we have is trying to get more younger people involved. We're an aging congregation, a lot of us are, and we don't have the younger kids or the younger adults to, you know, new families to kind of keep everything going. There's a lot of people, you know, there's other churches and different denominations that have opportunities for, you know, they do more things that are, I guess, more appealing to that generation. And I'm of that generation, but I grew up in the church. My dad was a minister for 35 years. I'm in the UCC. So, I mean, just reaching that younger population, having them realize they're important.
Connections, relationship, and value. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. And we've got about 15 minutes. I want to be sure that everybody that wants to say something can say something.
I think for myself, as a pastor that also works another full-time job besides being a part-time pastor, a lot of resources that are available for free that the church doesn't have to put more money out for, like you know, like a weekly planner that we could make in our little announcements that we could shoot out through a Zoom meeting. We can post them on our websites, or we can use them on our Facebook pages, or even on our, as we now for us to starting to put out a weekly service that we could put stuff on our PowerPoints. Just some of those types of resources, like with the worship ways. I use the worship ways, and I will be the first one to admit I have checked them up into different language to make them work within my congregation. And maybe just having them available on PowerPoint, that we don't have to sit down and retype them in a PowerPoint to put them on our service site. So just those little different things of being supportive to the local church. But I think we also, I think there's one more thing I need to say here. Because of the constraints of budgets within the church, I had to choose to not attend the annual meeting due to the fact there wasn't enough money to cover for me to go from in my church budget. And being aware that the rural churches are in constraints, and if we are asked to attend, and I do know there was resources available, please hear me say that. I knew there was resources available, but there's only so much resources that are available. So how do we make it accessible to all, and not just, you know, move? And I'll say moving to Lancaster and getting the uppage. My church didn't want to pay for me to go, so I had to now attend by Zoom. So I'm gonna put that out there.
Thank you, Tammy.
Roberto, I'm just thankful that the national organization is really recognizing that the rural churches need something different in order to really be in relationship, I think, with the national level. Because there is a huge disconnect in my experience with that. And some of it is the language. And I know when I've preached different places, people say, oh, we really like you. You speak in real English. You know, in other words, I try to make things understandable in a different way. And I like that some of you seem to be paraphrasing. I've certainly done that before, some of the material. But I think many people just don't see the relevance of the national organization to them. I just don't think that they understand the link and what it brings to them. So I'm grateful to see that recognition.
Thank you, Doug. And I want to echo what you're saying, because as a small church pastor, before I got involved in the association, it felt, whether it was real or not, it felt like we were in our own little valley. And it was that way when I was in Upper Northumberland County. It was that way in rural, another part of Snyder County, and another church that I served. So I've seen the connections at least expand over the last few years, to the point that we're here. Roberto took a Monday evening in June to come to be with us tonight, to help me. Thank you so very much. But to bring that voice, to bring that presence, and to say by his presence that we matter. And we haven't been easy on him tonight. We've told him that there's a disconnect. We've told him the language doesn't work. We've told him stuff's too expensive. He knew it was all coming. We both heard it before. All of those things were said at the rural gathering in February. So I'm not saying y'all aren't creative, but know that those are some of the connecting issues that we have, but that are both opportunities. So in our last 5 minutes, parting thoughts. That's the wrong way, Julie. The computer's up here.
Well, it's almost like maybe the rural coalition needs to step in somehow to be the mediator between the rural church and the national church. Maybe that's where the repository needs to be, is in the rural coalition. Because who understands it better than those who are in that situation? So maybe, that's what needs to happen. Because the national church is the national church, and it's also involved internationally. So, maybe the rural coalition needs to step up.
Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I know, because it's it's like our churches, it's like the schools, it's like anything. Under budget, under-personed, not enough people who want to get involved, people who are too busy. Well, I stepped forward in my church to say, hey, we need to get more active. And I got squashed by a young girl who said, but we have families and we just don't have the time. And I'm thinking, no, wait a minute. I raised 4 kids, in the church Was I as involved as I can be now? No. But I had 4 kids that were involved, and to me, it was just an excuse.
Can I be devil's advocate? And this might be going off topic, and if it is, Amelia, you can roll me out of order, and
Oh,
I
go
will-
for it. Go for it.
I will go away.
No.
Or at least mute myself for the next 7 minutes. But I can relate to. I don't have children or a family, but I can relate to what that young woman was saying. I mean, yeah, she might have been making an excuse. I get that, but raising a family, I mean, especially now, is a lot different than it was. I mean, again, I'm not trying to make excuses, and maybe this is where I put my foot in my mouth. But I guess what I'm trying to do is defend the younger generation. To be completely honest with you, Carolyn, not to call you out or anything, and that's not my point. But it's a lot harder than I mean, I have to kind of check myself too. So that's another thing. Like, there's a lot of stresses on more stresses on families than they used to. I guess that's my point. There are more stresses on families than there used to be even 5 years ago, pre-pandemic. I mean, whether it's sports, whether it's other community. I mean, and I'm sure you've all read this, but the church is just something else that is competing for people's time. And that's really I'm not trying to be a downer about that. That's just the way things are. I'm sure the ministers here in the group can especially agree with that.
No, you named something that needed to be said, Paul. Thank you. Julie.
When we wanted to include LGBT, whatever people, when we wanted to include people of color, when we wanted to include our PAM brothers and sisters and other siblings, one of the things that we have done is to have them represented in things like the writers group, leading synod worship, things like that. Writing synod worship, that needs to happen with rural folks. I think we get the impression that, and not always. I remember Amy Sense in her bluegrass group a couple students ago. I brought that music home and we've sung it since, but I think we need to see that the same way we do for all of the organizations. We need to have the Still Speaking Writers Group creating things that will touch rural people. And some of the people who create it have to be rural people.
Well,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Julie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
My teeny tiny itsy bitsy church here, right here where we are right now, has 2 synod delegates in it. So, it's, people like that could be utilized for this kind of thing. That's all I had to say. I probably said it like.
Thank you. Now, I want to be very careful of our time. It is 7:57. Please note that Roberto has put his contact information in the chat. For those of you.
Thank you.
For those of you. Go ahead.
Oh no, and going off of Julie's comment, and Roberto, you might have already started the process with this, but I mean, there are ways. I don't think it would be the context of a historically underrepresented group, but there are ways for coalitions like these to gain official recognition. That's the word I was looking for, from the synod. So I don't know if that's something that's been on your radar. I'm just an interloper here, so
You're not.
No, you're not. And
You're
Roberto,
not.
may I speak on this one because you weren't at our last gathering. There is talk about getting official recognition for the Rural Coalition, but one of the pushbacks that is already coming is that the Rural Coalition was formed as a grassroots group. And if the step is taken to be recognized, it sort of changes the emphases a little bit. So it is being talked about. And I don't know what the end of the conversation was, so I'll give that one to Roberto. But it's interesting you bring that up because we did just talk about it.
And I'm glad that Paul, you brought it up, because first, one thing I was reiterate, the UCC Coalition for Rural and Small Town Churches and Ministry is a grassroots organization. It began after we did a presentation, Reverend Dr. Biden Bates and I, at General Conference of General Synod at 2021. And after our presentation, there was an interest of continuing the conversation that began this group. And it's gotten larger and larger. And one of the goals were two ways, was to have a national gathering, which we accomplished this year in February 2023, and to seek recognition as an affiliated ministry. Now, what an affiliated ministry is, that this group will have its own autonomy. It'll be no different like the Faithful and Welcoming Church Network, the Open and Affirming, the various quorum groups like like United Black Christians. All of these are recognized and are affiliated, and usually once affiliation granted, is usually guaranteed a seat or two seats on the floor without vote. And so the goal here, I mean, the last coalition that was approved was the I think the Association for Associate Conference Ministers, ACMs. And so what they do is they meet, but they have their own autonomy, their own structure. And so that's what the coalition is attempting to do. And again, it doesn't take away its ongoing purpose is to be a grassroots voice of the churches that is now ruled. I have to make it clear, because I am a national, that I do not bring any agenda from national setting. Everything that's come out from the coalition has come out from the coalition. I am so proud of that gathering, 3-day gathering. All those workshops came by the desire of the membership, what they wanted to talk about. The ministers, the preaching, and all of that was based on what they needed and felt. So, so I continually invite everyone to spread the word. I put my email. Please feel free to reach out to me or share, wherever. But, know that for me personally, I have a passionate love for the rural and small town churches. I've already decided once my term is over at National that I will be definitely going back to pastoring, and it'll probably be, no, it's not probably, it will be a rural or small town setting.
Thank you, Roberto. And thank you all for being here with us tonight. I hope everybody has found something of use. I know I am encouraged and excited by the wisdom and the expertise and just the energy of everyone on this screen. So thank you for being here. This has been recorded. You will be directed to a link on the Penn Central website. There was a request to save the chat, which we have done, and we will provide that along with the recording. Thank you, Roberto, for being here. Thank you, Paul and Tammy, for helping us.
Thank you very much.
Do this. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. And if I may, I'd like to pray us out. Thank you, gracious God, for the blessing and the privilege of serving in small rural areas. Thank you for the energy and your presence as it is expressed in these unique and special places. Thank you for each one on this screen. Thank you for the place where they worship and where they live, for the people who lead them, for the communities that they serve. Thank you, gracious God, for your spirit moving among us. Help us, gracious God, to hear and to notice spirit moving and your guiding and your leading as we are your church in these days and in these times. Amen. And thank you so very, very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing.
You.
Paul and Roberto and Tammy, if you will stay on as we are done. And I thank you very much. Y'all have a good evening and hope to see some of you at conference over the weekend.